Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Bonehead Collective for episode 3 of Fable-top. I'm Bonehead.
I'm Diddy.
And today we are joined by a guest, one of the players from our Thursday game, who goes by Zenfire.
Hi guys, nice to see everyone.
So as usual, what we've done previously is we have separate topics and then we take turns discussing those topics. This week's going to be a little bit different as we are opening the floor to our guest for their topic of choice. So Zen, what are we talking about?
I thought that a great subject matter would be roleplay and the different things that come under it. Accents, how to play out a character arc, different things for DMs and players then to think about and potentially use in their own games.
So not something super easy, just like having a go at dark vision.
I thought, why not? You know,
Kind of a little bit more in depth.
it's something that I personally have found myself very much getting into over the last, say, 2 months of my play. Sort of getting past that comfortability barrier, putting in, a little bit of time outside of game to think like, how would my character react? How would they go about this situation, that situation? What kind of wording would they use? So I thought bringing you guys, into the conversation would be quite beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I'm much in the same boat as you. It's only really been in the last few months for myself that I've kind of tried to dip more of a whole foot rather than a toe into the pool of roleplay. Fortunately, both Diddy's campaign and Lee's campaign have allowed for that in some rather interesting ways. Plus, I think it's fair to say the banter between our Thursday group and the Friday group, it's I think what helps the roleplay is it feels very organic, like, because we are friends outside of the game, so the banter between our characters feels very natural.
Yeah.
I think that the way that our story in our Thursday game with Diddy is DMing for us, I think that at the start, we got on really well as a group of people, and that kind of made it really easy for us to kind of go past the RP and just instantly click and go goal. And one of the things that I've actually really enjoyed is Diddy giving us a lot of opportunities now to sort of get to know each other in character.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said to Bonehead in one of the previous episodes, is that when we all met on a Facebook group, I chucked you all. We all met on separate, actually, D&D Facebook groups. I chucked you all into a single D&D group chat, and you all just clicked straight away. You making jokes, bouncing stuff off of each other. You were all laughing. It was amazing to see.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we all came from separate groups except for me, because I kind of leached off of post requesting a game. And I just hopped into comments. I was like, "Could I play too?" And yeah, super grateful you didn't ignore me.
It was really a strange situation how Diddy contacted me the day of my advertisement, played a one shot the exact same day, and then the very next day we were all in a game, and lightning struck. We instantly got on. But I do think the fact that we did get on so well may have harboured us for RP, because outside of game we got on so well, and because we all thought in such a collective way, we kind of just went, here's our goal, let's get to our goal. If you get what I mean?
Yeah.
It kind of begs an interesting question, I think, of obviously some people, especially newer players, tend to avoid roleplay. Or at the very least, their roleplay interactions are minimal outside of just referencing themselves as their character name. As I suppose the question for both of you would be, Diddy as a DM and a player, and Zen as a player, do you think there are tips and advice you could give new players to help them come out of their shell a bit more?
Should we roll initiative to see who goes first?
Yeah, go for it. I've got opinions as well. So
actually, you just roll for us. Bonehead.
Nice.
I'll roll for you. Okay, so
go ahead. I just picked up a die.
Diddy has a 12, Zen has an 11, I have a 9.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
So it'd go. Yeah, sorry.
here we go. Diddy, Zenfire, Bonehead.
Then me. Yep.
Yeah.
Like as a DM, like I do want to create, not create. I do want to play these characters slightly outlandishly sometimes when they are a very eccentric character, but it gets very tiring very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, in the first episode of the Aquisitions Incorporated you met a goblin that was a very powerful wizard. Definitely a very powerful wizard in the caves.
Took me a second.
I can't remember who it was. Like you met this goblin.
Is that the one that Varud gave a nickname to?
Hooper Poop Shoe.
Probably.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't him. That was someone else.
Yeah, I had to check.
So this goblin like comes at you with just a stick. It's like, I am a powerful wizard. I will kill you if you don't move. Obviously, that it's funny for him to have that voice, but it gets very, very tiring very quickly.
Yeah.
I do think that for a DM, the fact that you have the responsibility to roleplay everything in the world does make it so that if you have to consistently do outlandish accents or whatever, it puts a strain on you, like genuinely physical. So it actually strains your voice and whatever. But at the same time, then it becomes a very hard task to even keep track of everything as well, because you've got so many different accents and characters that you've got to portray.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues a lot of people face with roleplay as well, regardless of if you're DMing or not, is there's always that kind of like built-in fear that you're going to embarrass yourself. And I think that's like one of the biggest hurdles players have to, and DMs as well, have to like get across, because like your players, like they react off you. They basically like feed off your energy as a DM in the situation, and if you're coming off like nervous or unsure of yourself, then the players are going to like reflect that in how they roleplay as well.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of players, or at least myself as well, from what I've seen online and from my own personal experience, I found that it's more about being comfortable with yourself to allow that feeling of... It's about giving yourself that feeling of getting outside of your comfort zone and portraying that role. It's a bit like when anyone would first get into amateur dramatics or anything like that. You've got to get over a self-confidence barrier to be able to dedicate yourself, and once you do dedicate yourself to playing out that character, it makes things like character arcs, good interactions between you and other players, it makes those things so much more worthwhile. If you had, for example, a situation where you say, I say this to that person, or compare that to a situation where you've got two players having a good back and forth, a really meaningful speech, both of those players will remember that encounter and talk about it for weeks, months, maybe even years, perhaps.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, like I think with like memorable stuff, if, for example, I gave this ridiculous voice to something, you're more likely to remember that encounter than if I just said, oh, you meet a goblin, he says this, he says that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, like, it doesn't always, like, NPCs don't always necessarily have to have a unique accent. Like, even things like speech patterns, the words they use, like what region of the world are they in? Like, do they have their... I suppose you could think of it as like maybe like Scottish slang against maybe someone from like East London. Like, they're going to have different words that have the same meaning, but ultimately that's what sets them apart from each other. Like, you could probably give them the exact same sentence and be like, right, put in the slang, and then, you know, like someone from South East London might be like, oh, that bird's well fit. But then someone from Scotland, like in ye old days, would be like, yeah, she's a bonny lass, or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Zen, of like there is like a self-confidence to overcome, and it's not easy for everyone. I mean, the game I've been running for you guys on a Wednesday, in the last session, that was probably like the first time I used more than just like one voice for a character. I did like orc voices, I did like that little blind old lady in the alleyway, and I tried my best to keep that Ekathar voice up, but that was such a strain. Because it's like you said again, it's not something, if you've never done it before, it's not practice, so you don't have like that kind of stamina for it.
No.
So if you do give yourself a strenuous voice to do, that may also in future put you off trying something like that again in fear of hurting yourself.
100%. I mean, Thurwood, the character that I tried to do for our Friday game for Lee, I went into that as my first account of roleplay with a character with a split personality and two completely different demeanors for both of those personalities. And for someone that was on their first attempt of roleplay, I can attest to what you've just said, Bonehead. Like, sometimes if you do something that is too strenuous for yourself, it can have that adverse effect of wanting you to play it. It will make you sort of take a stand back and not maybe enjoy that character or that campaign as much, because you've then got that association between, oh god, I've got to do this accent, or I've got to do all these other different things that impact that campaign and your enjoyability of that campaign.
Yeah, like, the average D&D player is not a voice actor, unlike the amazing people at Critical Role algorithm. Please, please boost this video. Not everyone's a voice actor. They're not going to be able to like do it just like that on the spot. Like, if you give someone a prompt, they're not going to be able to react the way that like their accent or character might actually react in that situation, because they haven't necessarily practiced with that accent. They haven't necessarily practiced with how that character would interact in that situation.
I suppose as well, one thing that springs to mind from that is like in regards of people not being voice actors, a lot of people, and it's something I am still currently guilty of, is in Thursdays I play Diego, in Friday games I play my Tiefling Cleric Killian. I role play them and like their mentality and like how they would react in a situation, but because I don't do a voice, it tends to default to just me and how I would react in that situation instead of how like Diego or Killian would react. I mean, there might be moments where you'll be like, oh my god, this thing from my backstory's happened. And then you completely forget that, you know, you are playing a character, and you're like me. My first train of thought in our last session with you, when we received those letters and we put it together, like who the bad guy was, my first instinct was like, right, I'm going to go through my notes. Who does Diego know whose name starts with an L? Didn't put two and two together that it was going to be Landmorn of all people. But then instead of like talking as Diego, I completely broke roleplay, and I was like, right, I'm looking through my notes thinking of everyone, like referring to Diego in the third person when roleplay should be a first person reference. And I think that is something new players, current players, and I've even seen it with some veteran players on some streams I watch, they completely break roleplay at like the worst time, and it does ruin immersion.
I do think that capitalizing on those moments can make a campaign so much better.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Diddy was saying, like, not everyone's a voice actor. You don't have to be a voice actor. You don't have to have some kind of, like, drama degree to play the game. Like, I think our group is, like, the perfect example of how, like, the most haphazard, slapped together roleplay ethic has genuinely worked well in our favour.
Because that's the thing. When I was putting the group together, I didn't like interview any of you. I just kind of like, all right, these are the first 4 people to reply. They'll do. And like then all I asked for was your characters, and you all made characters like that were completely different from each other, and it had a massive range of abilities. And I was like, well, this was perfect.
In fact, Diddy actually helped me to create said character, Zenfire.
We did.
Which is now the bane of his existence.
With your 22 AC and your advantage in almost every single skill.
One question... Sorry, do you want to...
No, that's fine.
One question when you mentioned, like, oh, we made characters... Do you think, and this is probably going to answer itself, I think this is a very obvious answer, but do you think there is that stereotype that, like, the race you pick and the class you pick then affects how you act as well? Do you think people look at the race they're playing, then work the personality out, or do you think people have a personality set, then to pick a race according?
No, I think people like would try to base their character off of their race. For example, if like there are 2 characters that I mainly play. Arden Brightwood, which is a half-orc fighter, folk hero, and Horatio Arlington Horntooth III, which is a human fighter noble. And I would always play Arden as a slightly more gruff, slightly less mannered kind of character, just because he's a half-orc rather than a human.
See, I'd actually agree with that point. When I was creating Zen, for example, with Diddy, one of the things I thought of was I wanted to be the big, strong, powerful type, heavy hitter with a few abilities. So Diddy, instinctively said, right, go for a Goliath or something like that, which I think does actually play into what you're saying, which is if you have a race that is basically a guideline to it. If you play something like a Leonin, they're known as, I mean, it even says in the books and wherever, it says that they're very proud, very wise, very well-mannered, etc. I think that doing that will actually help a player's roleplay as well, because it does give you a roadmap on how to play the character.
Yeah.
So for those of you that aren't more versed in experience, maybe that is a tip that we could give to people, is have a look at what race you're doing and what class, have a look at sort of generic personality types for those, and then sort of implement that into your roleplay and say if you wanted to play a certain kind of character, then maybe your choice would affect that.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of like my thought was kind of the same thing as what you were going off there. Like, if you are new to role playing and you want to like dabble and not exert yourself, one thing you could 100% do is look at things like these stereotypes that are put in place, or like the archetypes of like the class you're using, and then 100%, especially like first time players, just use that as a foundation for your character.
I think a lot of people maybe forget that like role playing, it isn't just putting a voice to your character. It is how your character acts. Because when we were in Cloud City, whatever it was called in your campaign, Loft, that's it. When we were in Loft, like Horatio is a womanizing alcoholic. So
we should also preference that you are not yourself a womanizing alcoholic.
I am definitely not. So, like, when he arrives in Loft, his immediate thought was, is there a pub? So he goes to the pub, and he's not saying anything. He's going, need to get to the pub. Need to get to the pub. I need a drink. I need to sit down with a glass of nice wine and just drink it. That would be amazing. I need to do this. He's not saying any of this, but it's the way he's acting like when Zenfire and Tannen were talking to someone else outside the pub, and Horatio was waiting outside with them. He was like looking back and forth at the pub, like gesturing, "Can we go in, please? I need a drink."
I mean, yeah, you and well, at this point, Zenfire's playing Turnip.
Yes. Sorry.
But yeah, like that is a good example. Like you were playing out how the moment Horatio realizes he's back in civilization, that he could finally probably go and get a drink, and then Turnip, as his character would do, when I described that, you were basically like on a cliff's edge. The first thing he did, like with that was perfectly in character, was I'm gonna jump off that fucking edge and fly around for a bit. And yeah, so yeah, it goes back to, it's not just about putting on an accent, it is about portraying your character accurately through how you present yourself. Like, I think that is a kind of a, like, if we're gonna go back to the giving tips thing, I think one tip I would give is get out of the mindset that you are in this world and try to remember as best you can that you are playing someone who lives in this world.
I think, building off of that point, I think one thing that DMs can actually do to help in that situation is to try and prompt the players to get into their in-character mindset by saying things such as, how would your character ask them that? How would your character feel being told this information? How would your character react in this situation? Like, try and prompt them so that they feel more comfortable, because it's not them having to initiate that roleplay. It's the DM who effectively is the world at large, sort of welcoming them in.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can speak for me and Diddy when I both say that, especially in like more recent games, we are trying to dabble in that a bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, I have been guilty of, like, I'll recap a session and then I'll just immediately be like, what are you guys doing? And that's like the extent of it for me. But I do, like, I suppose another example, if we're going to stick in Loft, is when I had the waiter approach Turnip.
Yeah.
To kind of like force an interaction, or I suppose a better example of it would be, even though this isn't as a DM, this is me as a player, when in our Thursday games I had Diego basically one at a time kidnap the other players into a pocket dimension and force them to talk to him, just to kind of like, force is the wrong word, but it was basically just to try and like alleviate some of that tension of like, are the other players or is someone going to overhear this conversation? Can I, like, try to get them to speak a little bit more candidly while having, like, no in-world implication or consequence for how they talk?
Yeah. I thought that was actually a really, really good idea. Diddy set us up with a 2-day voyage to get to the island that we needed to get to. And we effectively, as a group in the Thursday game, are only now trying to get a bit more in character with our roleplay, because over the last months we've got to know each other really well outside of character. But a point that myself and Bonehead discussed with Diddy before was, it's as if we've been travelling now for about 6 months in game, and I'd found out, for example, that Artemis really, really, really likes to sneak, and that Varud wants to be a fancy man and is 53. And
is he 53?
I missed that bit.
Yeah.
He's 50. Yeah, he's 53, I
That's
think.
young for a dwarf.
Yeah.
He's like a toddler.
This was the conversation that happened just after the Halia siege.
Oh, see, I was quite hyped up on torturing Halia. So
in Thunder Tree.
Yeah,
because as we were leaving Thunder Tree, Varud made a joke. I called him childish as Zen, and he turned around and said, "Well, I'm only 53," and I'm pretty sure of that.
I mean, anyone out of context who doesn't realise how long dwarves live for are probably thinking, well, 53, he's like halfway through his life, what the fuck?
It's like a quarter, isn't
Right,
it?
I'm looking it up now.
Live up to 400 years.
350 years. They live about 350 years, so...
Yeah, so he's like the real world equivalent of like a 1-year-old.
See, I will say that's actually something good to bring up on the topic of roleplay. Do you think that playing out a character's age should play a big part in how you play a character? For example, I'll give you the example of Turnip, who is currently 6, which would make him, you know, sort of mid-20s, I suppose, if you put it more of a humanoid lifespan, or he's twice his maturity age, for example.
You know, that's actually a pretty good question. I'd say it should only affect your roleplay if you are playing someone who is in their later years of their life cycle, or in the character I made, Pommel's case, where she is an 11-year-old girl. Then yeah, you would really play up like the immaturity side of it. But I think if you're like Diego, I feel really bad because every episode we've recorded, I've forgotten his character's bloody name.
Enro.
Yeah, like we are in our like 20s, and for our life cycles that's normal. So being a 20-something myself, I don't have to play any different, because like, you know, I am at like I'm far enough along in my life cycle that I am just a functioning adult cat person.
Yeah. And I think having, for example, if you have an older character, like you said on the adverse of the younger character with the childish tendencies, if you have an older character, you can play them out with a more raggedy voice, and you talk as if you've got no teeth. Like, I think that adds an element of flavour into the character that sort of makes it a bit more endearing if you do it within the right amounts. Yes, if you go over the top and you try and force the players to slow down their speed because your character has a bad back, I think that it could become tedious. But if you have, like, say, little mannerisms or something like that, like, for example, if you like put your teeth in a mug of water every night or something like that, it could help to flavour your character and even bolster your roleplay, because another player could ask you a question about why your character does that, and so on.
Yeah, it would be interesting to have a campaign ran by like absolute crotchety older men, and like you have disadvantage on like every roll. Like you've got cataract, so you can't do a perception roll. Like fucking acrobatics, out of the question.
You've got a bad back, that's with disadvantage.
Medicine check to make sure you're taking your doses correctly.
I just actually choked on A, because I just thought of, if you like fail a dexterity check and you have like the ruling for permanent wounds and whatever, you're just gonna have to have, like, I say, a tabaxi with a Zimmer frame because it's broken its hip from failing a dex check.
The image I've got is like a rogue who in his prime was like backflipping off everything and like fucking breakdancing on the floor for gold. And then like in his life he like takes a tumble down some stairs and his help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Like from a fucking rogue.
I've fallen.
And I can't get up.
No, but I think like even though we're like mentioning it as a joke, I do think that would be quite a good element to add into your roleplay. Like, you could, if you were playing an older character that, like, say you'd had a conversation with your DM about having a disadvantage on this role or something like that for the flavouring of the character, having that backstory then helps make your roleplay now A, make more sense, and B, it draws other players in more, because it makes it feel more believable that this character is acting this way because of this in its past.
Definitely.
Oh, 100%. I mean, in my monthly game, our DM, he would put, like, when it came to, like, Venomfang, like, he did, like, a really gruff, grumbly voice, and we were all getting into it, like, because he was taking it, and you could hear it was taking a toll on his voice, but he was going to that extreme. You know, like, he realised we were working off of it, and it kind of snowballs in a sense where, like, kind of what I said earlier, where like players feed off of the DM, and the DM in a way also feeds off the players. Like there is like a symbiotic relationship between DMs and players where one can't function without the other. Fundamentally, that is like the law of Dungeons and Dragons. So if you get a really good DM and a really compatible team, like everything then comes more naturally. Like how you work as a team in battle, how you handle situations where you look to rely on players with better skills than you. Then the role play as well, that comes into it. It all just kind of like compresses into this little orb of just like good time energy, I suppose. But I think with that, we should probably start saying goodbye.
Sounds
as
good.
we are
Went
coming
by
up.
really quick.
Yeah.
That flew by.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you so much for watching episode 3 of the Fable-top podcast. Thank you very much to Zen for joining us for this topic.
Thank you guys for having me.
I would say so far this has probably been the most on track and probably intellectual talk we've had so far.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Stick around for episode 4, as we do have another guest coming on, another member of our Thursday game. Yet to figure out what he wants to talk about, but time will tell. In the meantime, I've been Bonehead.
I've been Diddy.
I've been Zen.
And we will see you all in the next episode. Bye-bye!
Bye.